everyone, including his fellow Democrats, by surprise. Senator Evan Bayh today announced he will not seek re-election. That brings the avalanche of Democratic retirements in the Senate to 3, creating the next surprise. Even in a tough year for the majority party, retirements are still greater among Republicans. And the third surprise, Bayh's timing might actually limit the choices for the GOP in that race. The Indiana senator today saying he will not seek a third term. Former two-term governor cited his disillusionment with Congress.
For some time, I've had a growing conviction that Congress is not operating as it should. There is much too much partisanship and not enough progress. Too much narrow ideology and not enough practical problem solving. 2 weeks ago, the Senate voted down a bipartisan commission to deal with one of the greatest threats facing our nation, our exploding deficits and debt. The measure would have passed, but 7 members who endorsed the idea actually co-sponsored the legislation, instead voted no for short-term political reasons. I love working for the people of Indiana. I love helping our citizens make the most of their lives, but I do not love Congress.
Those 7 members to which Senator Bayh alluded there, all Republicans. The senator reportedly talked to President Obama this morning about his decision, but did not call the majority leader, Harry Reid, until after the news had broken this morning of an impending announcement. There's no indication Bayh was running scared. Recent polls had him well ahead, 20 points in some cases, of his likely Republican challenger. Indiana Democrats who wish to replace Bayh have until tomorrow to collect 4,500 signatures to get on a primary ballot. However, if no Democrats make that tight deadline, then the state party's Central Committee picks the Democratic nominee, and it has until June to do so, bypassing a primary altogether. But GOP candidates are expected to meet tomorrow's deadline petition, or petition deadline rather, meaning that their choices could be locked in within 24 hours. This according to analysis by Daily Kos. As for the retirement scoreboard and the 2010 midterm elections, 3 Senate Democrats, as we mentioned, having announced retirement. Bayh, Chris Dodd of Connecticut, Byron Dorgan of North Dakota. The GOP has announced 5 Senate retirements, adding the open seats of former Senators Obama and Biden, whose replacements are not running. That brings to 5 the number of open Senate seats from the Dems and 6 for the GOP. In the House, there will be 13 open seats now held by Democrats, but 18 now held by Republicans. Meantime, the far-right challenger to Republicans, Senator John McCain, has made it official. Former congressman and current radio talk show host and one-time sportscaster J.D. Hayworth announcing today he will challenge McCain in the Republican primary. Quoting Hayworth, "What I am hearing from people is that they want a consistent conservative. When it comes to the U.S. Senate, he's just been there too long. You have to ask, what has he done in the last decade in Arizona?" Let's turn to the Washington bureau chief for Mother Jones magazine, columnist for politicsdaily.com, David Corn. David, good evening.
Happy President's Day, Keith.
And to you, sir. Let's start with Senator Bayh. One unnamed source said that he hates the Senate and he hates the left bloggers. Is this a man who a long time ago made a bad career choice, or did somebody just give him the gift of the internet, or what happened here?
Yeah, you have to wonder what he's been doing the last 6 months or 6 years. Did he just wake up and realize that the Senate's not working that well, and that liberal bloggers, oh my God, don't like him that much? I mean, I never thought that, Evan Bayh would be made of weaker stuff than, say, Joe Lieberman, who seems to function rather well with those realities. So, I mean, he seems to have been dwelling upon this for a long time, but really it's not as if anything has changed dramatically within the Senate in the last 6 months or even the last year or two.
Maybe there is a laser beam at hand that the left-wing bloggers do not understand, and if only it could be focused in some way, we could just, clear out the entire Senate and most of the House, too.
Use that power for good.
Yeah, well, all right. The quick conventional thinking on this is that unless Bayh gave somebody in the Democratic Party heads up and nobody knows about this, he really didn't do anything to help his party retain the seat, or in fact was his timing relative to those petition deadlines actually, whether intended or not, a big favor?
Well, he raised millions of dollars as if he were going to run again. And then he sort of cut short that process. And it's true that the Democratic Central Committee of the state has until June to decide. But, I mean, it seems to me that he should be getting a John Edwards Memorial T-shirt that reads, "It's all about me." I mean, this is the decision that he could have made months ago. More time would have helped basically anyone on the Democratic side. Anybody who the DSCC, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, might have wanted to recruit for this position. Leaving a short amount of time is usually not a good thing for prospective candidates who need to raise big bucks to get things going.
Let's move to Arizona in a moment here, but I want that big picture first. We've been hearing a drumbeat of dire warnings about the midterm elections, relative particularly to Democratic incumbents. With what about that do you agree, and what makes it particularly volatile and unpredictable, and why, when these stories get covered, do all the Democratic openings get mentioned and the Republicans not?
Well, I think it's a wild card year. I don't think it's an ideological shift on the part of the public, but I think if you have 10 or, actually in some estimations, 17% unemployment for nearly a year, voters are going to be ticked off. They look at Washington and they see TARP, the jobs bill, and of course health care reform, and whatever side they may think they're on, it still looks to them like a holy mess. So they're disappointed, discouraged, they're mad. They want to, a lot of them I think, want to lash out. There are more elected officials with D's after their names than R's, so any incumbent has to be running a little scared if you have a volatile public that has sort of lost faith with the government. And early on in the show, you showed a quote from Dan Pfeiffer, the communications director at the White House, who said Barack Obama has to regain control of the narrative. Right now, I don't think there is anyone in charge on the Republican or Democratic side who has control of the narrative on health care reform or any of these other issues on jobs. It's certainly not Harry Reid, and it's certainly not the Republican leaders in Congress. So that said, it's kind of, everybody sort of has crosshairs on their back, and I think that all politicians are going to be running scared for the next, 9 months.
Is the guy in charge of the narrative actually J.D. Hayworth, for God's sakes?
Well, he's creating a pretty good narrative of his own, or inheriting one down in Arizona. I mean, part of the volatility is you have a lot of restlessness on the right. This doesn't, I think, reflect the whole population, but there are, conservatives out there who believe the Republican Party is practically useless. And, their #1 target for this is going to be John McCain, the guy who gave them Sarah Palin, their biggest conservative prize of years, is now the person who conservatives are gunning for. Talk about gratitude.
Right. What have you done for me lately? David Corn, the Washington Bureau Chief of Mother Jones. Thank you kindly, sir.
Thank you, Keith.